thank you all for coming here, and thank you for inviting me. I will try to convey how the tools that we have been and the technology we have been creating at IOV Labs can help financial inclusion, foster social inclusion. I think it can do even more than that. That is to create an inclusive financial system by design, no, or at least to support an inclusive financial system. In my point of view, we are not looking to create a financial system, a separate financial system, or a financial system for those excluded from the society, or for those who are in economic distress. What we want is to create a financial system that can serve any human being, regardless of its initial or current economic condition. And before entering into that, I will go building the vision, like block by block, from what we call the Internet of Value. I will go very, very fast because maybe others have seen the Internet of Value presentation, but I will revisit why I think these technologies and these innovations open a new opportunity to achieve this, to have an inclusive financial system by design. As all of us know, in the last 25 years, we have seen one big revolution. That is the revolution of the Internet of Information, where we could connect, not every human being, indeed half of the population is still unconnected, but we have make a big leap forward in terms of giving free access to information, giving societies a way to express their opinion without intermediation, without any kind of censorship. So we have seen how that technological revolution changed how we communicate, how we access knowledge, how we entertain as well, how societies share their opinion. But until recently, there was something that was not possible, that was basically to do the same, to disrupt how we transfer value. And what I always say, because some people is accustomed to using online banking systems and doing e-commerce and using financial tools online, is that although it looks like the financial infrastructure was digitalized, in reality, when we use those systems, there's always an intermediary behind the scenes controlling our money, to whom we gave certain instructions and execute the transfer of value in accordance with other intermediaries. So at the end, it's a trust system. It's a system where different parties establish certain trust models between them, contractually, via legal models. They establish these contractual agreements, and within that umbrella, the contractual umbrella, they can serve their end users. So it's basically what glues the financial system today is not technology, is legal models. So basically, when I subscribe to Visa, I'm entering into an agreement with Visa. When Visa has an agreement with a bank or a merchant. So it's a chain of legal contracts that create that impression that we have a globalized financial system. But as we know, and that has been going for a long time, that has hundreds of years. I mean, we have the early financial intermediators that enabled trade across continents in a time where it was very, very difficult. They were absorbing risk. So, I mean, in in a society where technology was not widespread, it made total sense to have these intermediaries. They actually help society. They make society, turn our society into a global society. So I think that's why I always use the example of Marco Polo, no? That he enabled trade between Venice and Beijing, creating that intermediation or that trust link. Very likely back then there was not a legal contract. If Marco Polo didn't fulfill its duty, they could just kill him or something like that. But that has evolved as well. So the trust models have evolved. But there's a problem with that. That is that, these intermediaries are not necessarily very efficient. These contractual models are not efficient because these systems not always speak to each other properly. So that intermediation, has a cost. Also, as you are relying on third parties, you have to have a lot of mechanisms in place to control the intermediaries, to make sure that they fulfill their duties properly, that they don't run with your money. There are places, for example, in Argentina, we had the first bail-ins where, the banks, in accordance with the government, but they locked the value in every bank account and people could not move their own money for a long time. And then when the money was liberated, the depreciation of the local currency versus the dollar made that money worth 1/4 of the original value. So that is over a period of a year. So those are examples where intermediaries fail to serve others. And the other big problem we have is that intermediation also is costly because of what I was saying, incompatibilities between different intermediaries, the insurance you need to make and the checks, the auditing systems you need, the security systems you need to maintain those intermediaries safe and within control. All those are translated in costly systems or service provision, financial service provision. So the question is, and as a consequence of that, half of the population of the world is not receiving the basic financial services. They are excluded from our society, and in a way doomed to poverty forever, because if you don't have access to financial services, you cannot expand yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, you are in a very fragile situation. When you have an accident or anything arise, you don't have a way to keep like a good life, and also for you or your kids, and to project yourself into the future, because at the end, financial services are a tool for that, for safety nets, to expand the potential of human beings, or they should be. No, they might be used in different ways, but they should be connected to that need. So the question here is why the internet that solves so many problems didn't solve this core problem, this problem of creating a financial system without intermediaries. And the reason why is because the information, digital information, can be replicated almost instantly and without cost, or with very, very, very low cost, infinitely. And that's I would say the core challenge to create a scarcity. And money is scarce, or valuables, any asset that is valuable for a human being. If it's valuable, it's also because it has a certain level of scarcity. So the main challenge that the Internet of Information had in order to solve this problem of having a peer-to-peer financial system was basically how to create digital scarcity. And because those are the foundations for anything else, no? To create a financial system, you need that scarcity, and you need to know that every representation of money or a valuable cannot be copied, cannot be fake. So that's a key element. And this had no solution until something amazing, in my point of view, emerged. That was Bitcoin. And to many, Bitcoin is just a cryptocurrency, but when I got in touch with Bitcoin in 2012, my feeling was that Bitcoin was the beginning of something much bigger. It was the beginning of something I was looking for many years. That was the way to establish trustable contracts, social contracts among people in a big scale. Because at the end, everything is social contract. Is a social contract. Even money is a social contract, because we are agreeing on what is valuable, what is scarce. That's how, in the beginnings of money, people was using shells or salt to trade, because in their regions, those assets were scarce, so they became money. So it was a social contract to say, okay, I think, as you cannot fake salt or replicate it limitless, I can trust that if you give me 1 kilogram of salt, the effort to get 1 kilogram of salt will be even among all of us. But, what Bitcoin created is this digital scarcity for the first time in human history. And also, of course, created a payment system that is used by all these companies. Most companies that are receiving Bitcoins, basically they use a payment processor and they change it to the local currencies. But still, Bitcoin proved that you could have the same that Skype did for communications for money. So suddenly, before Bitcoin, there was no way I could send money across the world to anybody within 10 minutes. It was impossible. Like the alternative system, the SWIFT system, was taking, maybe, 2 days and cost $25, $40. So there was no way of having a truly, global financial system that was efficient, that was peer-to-peer, that could connect any place in the world. And also, Bitcoin has another attribute that is also became a neutral reserve of value or store of value. And as it's scarce by design, also it became kind of a digital gold. But something I discuss a lot with Bitcoiners is that, that attribute of digital gold can only be valuable for those who can save in long terms. So that's, it's a very valuable feature, but it's a very valuable feature for those who can have savings for a couple of years or 3 years. It's not, it cannot be accessed, I would say, for 3/4 of the population that live day by day, week by week, month by month. So although Bitcoin is, if you want, a tool for liberation, and more in the context of very unstable economies, like it can be in Latin America. We have Venezuela, even Argentina. So we have certain economies where the local currency is so volatile or depreciates so fast, where Bitcoin, it's also a tool in the short term. But in most cases, Bitcoin is a tool for preserving value and purchasing power for the long term. So that leaves the needs of 3/4 of the population, and certainly the needs of that half of the population that is excluded by the traditional financial system, unanswered. But what Bitcoin also gave us, aside this amazing global remittance system, this neutral and reliable store of value, is core technologies that can build other systems that can serve all the human needs in terms of a store and transfer of value. And those are the three components underneath Bitcoin, the three core components are the blockchain. And when people talk about the blockchain, I think today is like, I think it's also a mythical term, because when they speak about blockchain, they encompass a lot of things, you know, in the term blockchain. But blockchain is not more or less than basically a data structure where you are chaining data, you know, the blocks of data with each other to make sure that you have good auditing capability. So if somebody changes something on some data that was chained a long time ago, that creates a ripple effect, a domino effect, and necessarily needs to make changes in all the data that was chained afterwards. So that gives you amazing auditing capabilities. That enables you to really know in real time if somebody is tampering with the ledger. So it's very valuable, but by itself is not relevant, because, you know, if we have like a single blockchain, a single version of the database, at best we have an immutable database, a database where I can add records, but I cannot modify them, I cannot delete them. But you know, if a hacker gets into the server that has that single database, then, you know, and change it, we cannot know or compare which blockchain was the original one. So, you know, since the 80s, we have different consensus protocols that say, okay, why don't we have replication mechanism where this data is replicated, you know, in multiple servers, and as long as 2/3 of those servers remain, you know, trustable, and consistent, we will know which version of the ledger is the good one. But Bitcoin went one step further and did something that also was unique in history, that was never done before, because peer reviewing of ledgers is something that existed since the feudal times. The feudal lords had a mechanism. The feudal lord was the owner of the book where he was registering all the contributions of the peasant in exchange for his protection. But if there was a mismatch, then the peasants had like a peer review system to adjust the lord's book. So this concept of having a federation or a shared ledger among multiple people existed before the age of computers, and conceptually was just like changing you know, one model to the other. But what Bitcoin did is something that was completely unique. Is it created the first system that didn't have like a approval of the members of the auditors and registrars of this ledger. So basically, anybody fulfilling certain criteria that were completely objective, there were no subjectivity. In the case of Bitcoin, is what we know as the miners, could join by putting certain hardware, devoting certain certain electricity to run that hardware, and only by doing that and proving that they are doing that computational effort, they could basically join the network. So it's that is unique in the sense that it's the first or collective ledger where the scribes of that ledger can be, you know, redefined dynamically. So you can add or remove members easily. And then also it added another thing that it's very, very interesting, that it added game theory to the model. So these scribes or producers of this ledger, as they need to do the investment before they can operate in the network, they already are invested in the proper functioning. They are betting on the proper functioning of the network, because otherwise their investment goes to zero. So basically, it created, you know, security, economical security model. So that's very interesting as well. When you combine all these things, when you combine open blockchains, because now we know that well, we have much more than, than Bitcoin, protected by decentralized networks, in my point of view. And when you connect these different decentralized networks among them, what we assist is to the creation of something new. And I think we are in the early days of that phenomenon, and that is the Internet of Value. So the Internet of Value is a network of networks for the store and transfer of value that, in my opinion, will become the financial infrastructure of the future. And, you know, with the Internet of Information, that we were building protocols and technologies, one on top of the other. One technology was enabling the following creation of a protocol or use case. The same will happen with the Internet of Value, or is already happening with the Internet of Value, because as we discussed before, Bitcoin provides us a store of value for the mid to long term, you know, and there were other cryptocurrencies that were not necessarily designed with a store of value in mind, but they can be used for that as well. And then we assisted to the creation of a second layer, that is basically the settlement of agreements between parties, or business logics, if you want. And that second layer is what RSK brought to Bitcoin, what Ethereum built together with the first layer. In the case of Ethereum, the two layers are in one network. In the case of RSK, when we built it, we designed it in a way where it was decoupled. And also, that second layer has another functionalities, because the lower you go on this stack, basically you maximize. As you go down on the stack, you want to maximize security. As you go up on the stack, you want to maximize functionality and scalability and usability. Same as with the Internet of Information. In the Internet of Information, we say, okay, TCP/IP, nobody is writing TCP/IP packets on its own. So, but that enabled to create upper layer protocols like HTTP, and then on top of that, you know, build applications. So that's the same model. And also another thing that we are solving as we move through the stack is the scalability problem, because given the security constraints of Bitcoin, for example, you can only process maybe 5 to 7 transactions per second. And if we think about all the transactional systems in the world, you are talking about a couple hundreds, maybe 300,000 transactions per second. So it's multiple order. If we want to serve humanity, you need infrastructure that can scale many orders of magnitude above what we have in Bitcoin. So we are talking about maybe 3-4 orders of magnitude what we have in Bitcoin. And Ethereum also did a good work, like improving on settlement time, because the settlement in Bitcoin is 10 minutes, in Ethereum is 15 seconds, in RSK 30 seconds. So it improved for other use cases. It lowered the transactional cost, although now in Ethereum it's very expensive, but it's that's because the network is congested. But basically, we know that blockchains are expensive by design. No, it's like security has a cost, because you're replicating all the data among hundreds or thousands of servers. Those servers need to come to an agreement of what's the latest state of the ledger. So basically, having decentralized blockchain networks is expensive. So we needed like a third layer on top of that. So now we have a second layer for settlement of agreements that can scale to couple hundred transactions per second. That lowers transactional cost in the case of RSK to maybe 4 or 5 cents per transaction in the case of the usage of tokens. But we need more, because we are still in PayPal levels. We are not in Alipay levels. We are not yet in the level. So that's when a third layer appears. That is a purely peer-to-peer layer that only uses the agreement settlement layer when there's a dispute. So that's a model that is emerging. It's what Lightning is doing in Bitcoin. Raiden in Ethereum, Lumino in RSK, is basically a purely peer-to-peer layer where we actually can exchange value among peers, knowing that if the counterparty fails to the agreement, I can go to the underlying layer, I can go to the agreement settlement layer and enforce the transaction. So that creates huge savings, and that's also how society works. Because when we enter into a shop, we are not signing a contract with the shop saying, I will pay everything that I'm getting in the cart. It's basically an unspoken agreement. But if I try to run through the door with the goods without paying them, for sure, you know, the shop owner will call the police, so they enforce the agreement. So maybe the police is the smart contract layer. And then finally, what we are seeing is applications that use all these protocols, these peer-to-peer protocols, these blockchain agreements, this store of value, to create solutions for the end user. And that's where I want to go. So in our particular case, in the case of RSK, what we are building is like we call it like the Pokeball. So basically we are saying, okay, we have the store of value, we wrap it with a business logic layer, we create all the RSK infrastructure protocols that solve the scaling and the usability problems. So we create kind of a peer-to-peer internet, so people can, you know, safely store sensitive data in a decentralized network, encrypted, so they are protected. So they can these networks, you know, they can process very low transactions. In the context of financial inclusion, having transactions that are less than 2 cents USD per transaction is crucial. And you know, that solves all the needs that somebody that is excluded from the society. That's why we designed all these protocols, because we thought, you know, okay, you have Amazon Web Services. So if I want to store all my reputational information, I can save it but if I'm excluded, I don't have a credit card to access Amazon Web Services. So we need infrastructure that is fully integrated into this ecosystem. And of course, on top of that, you know, you need to create libraries and APIs and documentation, so developers don't need to go deep into and that's also something that the ecosystem development of RSK is building, like libraries. So we abstract the complexities of all these protocols, so a developer can focus on what he or her should be focusing, that is basically solving problems for society, you know? And so the Internet of Value, as I said, is a network of networks interconnected. So we see these layers, you know, also being integrated to other crypto economies and being integrated among them. That's already happening partially. But what is this enabling? I mean, we have all this infrastructure. Let's assume that the infrastructure is very close to having production readiness. I would say, I think between this year and next year, we'll have all these protocols like in a fairly mature point, and we will see this Internet of Value emerging in a very usable way. We are still pioneers, I would say. But what we are doing with all this, or what we can do with all these technologies, basically start creating, the first step is to create a digital twin of the world. So now that we have digital scarcity, we can create unique identities, unique digital assets that represent everything that is valuable for the human beings, from our identity, the assets we own, you know, intellectual property, the titles of the land, stock, currencies, and also register events in a trust way. So we can also have like certain events that are very relevant for us, can be anchored or signed, certified very, very inexpensively and in an open environment, so others don't have to trust me, that don't have to trust each other if those events happens. Because if we think trust or the certification of events is also a social event, it's like that I'm Diego, it's something that basically is the combination of the doctor that attended my mother during the birth labor, certify or attested that he saw me coming out of my mother. My mother and my father attested that they wanted to put me the name of Diego, and then all those attestations were taken by the government, and based on that they issued a document. So in that sense, for identity is a social construct, but we don't think about it. We think that it's a static thing, but it's everything is a social construct. Is the attestation of events. It's also, and this is fundamental for what I'm going to say at the end of the presentation. Also, what we are doing is reclaiming the power of private money. And I think, private money has been, money has been private or regional or community driven for most of human history. It has been like that, and until maybe 300 years ago. The concept of money and state being combined is pretty recent in human history. It's not that, and the reason why we went there is because there was trust breaches, because all those issuing money started failing their obligations. No, it was the same problem I was depicting at the beginning on the intermediaries and the trust on the intermediaries. So all these notes that you're seeing there have in common that they were privately issued. No, so it's the Ipswich Bank creating a £10 note. Is the one in the middle is the oldest form of money from a province in China, maybe in the year 900. So basically what we have is, we are reclaiming private money. And I think this, in the context of social inclusion, social and financial inclusion, is key, because I think one of the biggest tools that we can bring to the communities is the creation of community money or community economies. These local economic circuits can foster local development. For those interested in that, read the experience of Banco de Palma in Brazil, which had no technology whatsoever. It was paper-based and old school. But conceptually, that's a great example of how community money can save and foster a community that otherwise was impoverished. And of course, we have challengers. Now we have, the big tech companies, the social networks, also trying to say, okay, we want to reclaim also the money for us as well in a corporate approach. And I think it's good, because I think that tension between the state issued money, the community money, and this corporate or coalition money, I think that will create effectively a better financial system, because it creates also like checks and balances. So, governments need to work well, because people have options to go to better money if the local money is not serving them properly. No, so I think that is another phenomenon that is more recent, that have a couple of years with the emergence of Libra. But I think this model of private money is re-emerging thanks to technology. The other thing we can do with this is improve processes, of course, because now we have agreements that are settled in a trusted layer. Nobody can tamper with the agreement. So as I said, this scales social contracts, because it enables us to trust that a social contract will be enforced by a network that is neutral, has no political interest into the social contract the network is enforcing. The network just follows the rules. And also it creates in the context of social and financial inclusion, it creates something that for me is very interesting, is that we have a lot of the taxing and compliance systems in the world are structured in a way where it's like a binary. It's like, you are either comply, like the minimum level of compliance, the minimum level of taxing is not suitable for those that are, it's targeted for those maybe that are included within the financial system. But if you apply those same rules and taxes to those that are below the line of poverty, they could not live at all. So we have a system that is not adapted to the needs of each citizen, because we couldn't have enforcement in a proper way. So the traditional models were very expensive to be applied dynamically. But with this, we can do incremental compliance. If somebody is moving $100 per month, they are surviving. They don't need to fulfill any compliance. They don't need to pay any taxes. Indeed, we should give them back any taxes so they can buy more food. They can improve the life of their kids. So we can create that. If somebody expends more or earns more than $100 per month and up to 400, we can say, okay, I need some kind of identity, maybe, and if it's more than 400, I need some domiciliation. But I can do a system that adapts to the situation of every human being. So we can also create more inclusive, compliance and taxing models. And of course, another thing that is very important on this is transparency, because in Latin America, we have a big problem that of the social aid or of the money that it's assigned to social development, very little really gets to the ground. Very little gets to the actual intended destinataries or recipients of that help. So transparency also will help avoid this leakage of value in the distribution chain. So as some final thoughts, because I think I'm on time, but one reflection is that our society has a programming language, and that programming language is the law. That's why basically the legal contracts are programs. If you look them, they say, okay, if I do that, this will happen. If you do that, this will happen. If this doesn't happen, then this will happen. So it's basically a logic flow where you have different parties involved, and the legal system is basically the computer that runs and enforces those programs. And as I said, some programs are unspoken. They are like, they just are enforced naturally, because if you don't enforce them, then you have to abide by the law. The computer will come and enforce it. So with smart contracts and this second layer of settlement of agreements, digital settlement of agreements, what we did is basically replicate that. We have in this case, the law, it's a programming language. It's actually, you can read the code and see that the enforcement or the legal system is a decentralized network that executes those agreements. But
my suggestion would be to wrap up the session. We will ask Diego to share the slides, as well as soon as we have the recording ready, we'll share that also. And if you have any questions with any of the remaining slides, then we can always get Diego on Slack. Sounds like a good plan?
Sounds really good. So thanks everyone, really appreciate having you, and then hope to see you next week for our next session with Lawrence on Tuesday. I think it's at 1 p.m. GMT. Right, Antonio?
Correct, yes. 2 p.m. current local time in the UK. just to confuse everyone.
You two of us. Cool. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thereby ending this session now, and then see you all next week. Thank you very much.
See you all on Slack. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.